This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne, and as always, this is an England supporters podcast. Lots of great feedback on the series of your first England away game, so thank you very much for that. And you'll be pleased to know I have another one now for you. Firstly though, if you would like to get involved, drop me a line, either by email, threelionspodcast@gmail.com, or you can do it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Let me know your first away trip and I'll look at getting you on board. So far in this series, we've been to Greece, France, Germany. Now we're going a little further afield. Ukraine, with someone who's been a regular following England home and away since 2013, and someone who has regularly appeared on the podcast, and someone who has become a good friend over the years. Okay, welcome back to the Three Lions podcast. Here we are again. We're doing another one of our Your First Away Game. And I'd like to welcome back to the podcast someone we've spoken to regularly. CJ Joyner is going to tell us about his first away game. CJ.
Hello, Russ.
You all right?
I'm all good, thank you.
Good stuff. Well, as I say, we've spoken to you plenty of times on the podcast about your previous journeys and where you've been away and told us what it's been like. Have we ever actually found out who you are? Introduce yourself. Go on, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a Coventry City fan and an England fan. My first Coventry City match, I think, was in about 1992. It was against Everton and we lost 1-0. So I started as I meant to go on there. I work within sport and in schools, and we also do lots of other things as well in schools. We teach a lot of children in the local area and beyond.
Good fun, I imagine.
It is, yeah. You get to meet a lot of different people.
So England, when did the England bug find you?
The first England game I can really remember, I went to a few when I was a lot younger, but the first one I remember when I was kind of going on my own or with a group of mates or whatever was Ireland in 2013. So it's actually relatively recently, to be honest. The year before, I went to the Euros. And we actually flew in the day after we lost to Italy, which wasn't great planning. But we went to the semi-final, Portugal v Spain. That was a 0-0. But I mean, you got to watch that brilliant Spain team, and they had such good players back then. They're probably the best team I've ever seen, to be honest. With some of the best players. That's
quite a statement.
Yeah, they were fantastic. But that was both club and international level. That they were probably the best team I'd ever seen. I mean, I remember Casillas kind of receiving the ball and flicking it as a no-look pass to one of the fullbacks, and I thought that's the goalkeeper that's just done that. So yeah, you can't really say any more than that really about that. So the first game when I really fell in love with England, I suppose, where I was actually there was the Ireland game, and it was 1-1. Shane Long scored, I think, for Ireland, and I can't remember who scored for England in that game, to be honest. But yeah, it wasn't one that lives in the memory, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, with regards to it wasn't a fantastic game, but kind of ever since I've rarely missed a game since then, home and away.
Well, I mean, when you came to me and said I've got my first England away game, and when you told me about it, I thought, going to have to do a little bit of research on this one because it didn't come instantly to my mind. Go on, tell us what was your first England away game.
Ukraine, a few months after that Ireland game. It was in Kiev, and it was 0-0, and it was a qualifier for the World Cup in Brazil.
That's right. So, I mean, this was, as you say, in Kiev, in the Olympic Stadium there, a ground that I'd actually been to a year previous for the Euros. I'd seen England against Sweden in that same ground. But yeah, 10th of September 2013, Ukraine 0, England 0 for you. Go on. So how did it all go? Tell us right from the beginning. What do you remember about it all?
Well, like my Coventry City journey, which started off with a 1-0 loss. I started as I meant to go on and watched a 0-0 draw. So, yeah, it was. I went with a couple of mates. We got an apartment in Kiev. It was. It reminded me a little bit of Nelson Mandela House, to be honest, where Del Boy and Rodney used to live. But it was. It was an interesting. It was an interesting place. We flew into Kiev. We headed to the city. We got our apartment and we headed down into the city centre. We spent quite a lot of time on the strip there. We actually, I think we went from Sunday to Saturday, I think it was. So we just made a week of it, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the game was on the Tuesday.
Yes. So and when we booked everything, because they'd hosted the Euros the previous year. And I mean, with regards to, you've got the Donbass in Donetsk, it's an unbelievable ground, and then you've obviously got Lviv and Kharkiv as well. So it was a little bit like, well, where will we be playing? So, and I knew how big Ukraine was from the previous year, so it was kind of like, well, we don't want to be landing the day before the game, and then be getting.
So you'd booked this well in advance of not even knowing the venue.
It was probably about March time, something like that, when we booked the flights. So
right,
and as I said, it was just a case of just plenty of planning. And we both had, well, all three of us had plenty of time to spend off work. So what we could easily just spend a week there and just explore the city, really. Because I mean,
so it's a nice city.
It is, yeah. Well, I mean, it was obviously, this was before the revolution, the revolution or the war or what have you, and it was. Yeah, it was. There was a few things I remember there that just really stood out for me. Like, we were just walking down the street and there was this statue just toppled on the floor, just in bits. And you think, what's going on here? So we spoke to a local cafe owner who just said, well, yeah, it got toppled several years ago, and it's kind of just stayed there as a symbol. And it was out into the road because, traffic had to go round it and whatever. And then, but like I said, obviously, the whole city probably changed to look very similar to that small area within a year or two of us being there, because it's just what happened with regards to Crimea and so on. When I was seeing those pictures on the TV, on the news and everything of there and of Donetsk as well, it's very sad. And I just thought these people that certainly deserve a bit better than this, because the majority of the people that live there that we met were very nice people. As I said, we had an apartment. It was quite high up. I think it was quite a tall building. It's a fantastic view across the city. The other thing that stands out for me was the amount of cranes.
Oh, right.
They were doing a hell of a lot of building work. And I remember just in the week that we were there was a building that gained about 3 floors. Just down the street, and it seemed like every day there was a new floor going up on it. It was some place, really, Kiev. Yeah, there was certainly an undercurrent to it where you just thought there's something else going on here that we don't kind of know about. It seemed quite secretive. Guys in Range Rovers sat there in suits just all day. But you could see through the windows, sort of 4 of them sat there, and they'll still be sat there the next day, kind of thing. And you think, oh, what are they doing? What are they there for?
Yeah.
And then there was one of the 2 times where we were walking down the street, and we were walking back to our apartment. It was about 1:00 in the morning, and all of a sudden this van pulled up, and a load of police just jumped out of it, fully armed up in riot gear, and they took our passports off us, and they were checking our IDs and making sure we were who we said we were. I don't know how they did that, and I mean, that was a little bit scarier, because they thought, well, are we going to get our passports back here? Are we going to end up in the gulag?
No way.
So we were a little bit worried there about what was going to happen, but they said, okay, on your way, and that was it. And the police were certainly interested in there. I've got to say, there were a lot of stories. One of the lads that I was with caught a bit short, and went down a side street, to relieve himself. And apparently he'd only got his zipper halfway down before he had a tap on the shoulder, and it was 2 policemen and they basically asked him to pay up, or they'll take him to the police station. So they gave him an on-the-spot fine. Where that money ended up, we don't know, do we? But there was also one or two other stories as well for some of our mates that I know from commentary games that were out there, that was frog marched to a police station for jetty walking, and eventually was let go when they paid when they got to the steps of the police station. So I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, of any corruption, but you speak
I
as you
think you almost have, haven't you?
Yeah, you speak as you find, don't you?
Yes.
And the other thing that really struck me about the place was how cheap it was. We managed to find a bar where it was must have been about 25 pence a pint, something like that. It was just basically a bookcase with a couple of barrels in it, and some taps on top of it. And it was kind of, I think it was in like a newsagent's or something like that. And it was about 25p a pint. That was. Soft drinks were considerably more expensive than
the local moonshine.
Alcohol. I noticed water was about £1 a bottle. The food again was really cheap as well. It was a lot cheaper than the year before. There was a little bit of trouble there. Well, it was actually on the night we arrived. There seemed to be a lot of England fans arriving there on the Sunday, a lot, and I think there was some even there that was there before the day before we got there on the Saturday, and I think we had a home game on the Saturday. I seem to remember. I can't remember who we played. I'm sure we did, but either way, we arrived there on the Sunday, and as we arrived, as I said, we got to our apartment, then we went out and we went down the strip, and one of the bars that was pretty full of England fans was attacked by a group of ultras that were in balaclavas, and they were using smoke grenade, whatever they may have been. They were maybe flares or something like that, and it filled the place full of smoke, and they were throwing flower pots and bricks into the in there, and there was quite a few England fans that were injured.
Really,
I remember there being the blood-stained block paving. I remember that outside the bar, and the devastation inside afterwards. And it was quite shocking, really. And the main thing they were after was the flags. They took the flags, and I think they appeared in the ground during the game. So there was that as well. That was on the first night. There wasn't a massive England contingent there. I don't know, but for some reason at Stickham and Ryan there was 1,985 of us there. Everyone that could have got a ticket got one, and obviously there was a few in the home end that weren't necessarily members, but because a lot of people had been there the year before, I don't think it was a particularly attractive fixture. And then it was about 2009, I think, as well. I think we played there. So
2009. When you mentioned this to me, I think we lost 1-0. And the 2009 game, if that was the year, was a game I actually watched in the cinema, because the neither say Sky, the BBC, or ITV actually got the rights to the footage of it.
That's a bit strange, isn't it?
It was very
the last
strange.
England game that was like that. Was it the Spain game? Was that the last time we'd lost? Yeah, I lost a competitive fixture that wasn't in a tournament. I think the Spain Nations League game. I think the last time before that was. I think it was that Ukraine game. I think so.
I see.
As I said, our game was completely unremarkable. One of the many things from that trip that did stand out for me, and I started going to football in the early 90s, and throughout the 90s, it probably did happen, but I was a kid, so I didn't necessarily notice it. It didn't occur to me as, but it was the kind of the first time where I'd ever come across any sort of racism in a stadium that I was fully aware of. At the start of the game, the England players were all shown up on the screen. It showed a picture of them, so you had Joe Hart and whatever. Which initially we thought, oh God, they're showing pictures of our players. It's not just the names, it's not the pictures. And you thought, oh, that's pretty impressive. And then it got to like number 2, Kyle Walker, and it was just a silhouette. And we thought, oh, hang on, this isn't quite.
Are they missing a picture?
Yeah, and then it kind of Ashley Cole, and you thought, okay, there's another silhouette, and then number 4, Gerrard. and then it was his picture, and you kind of realise what was going on, part way through, and you just thought, this is just not right at all. This is from the previous year when we were going over for the tournament. You had the Sol Campbell documentary and everything else, and there was a lot of propaganda put out there about how it's such a racist country and so on. You got that. You got there the previous year. The previous year, we thought what a multicultural place it was. Obviously, it was a tournament, so there was people from all over the place that had descended on there. But you just sensed that everyone was embraced. Everyone was kind of the same. But this was the first time it kind of pops up where I thought there's something not right here at all. The only time we really encountered it when we were out there, it was very, very, very strange. It could have just been a complete coincidence that certain players didn't have their faces shown on the big scoreboard. However, you can draw your own conclusions to that.
Yeah. What was the reaction with the England fans amongst you to it? Did a lot of people have a pick up on it?
I think a few did. A few seemed to around us. However, obviously, when you hear the player's name read out, and you go, "Oh, hey," like that. So, not everyone's necessarily looking at the scoreboard. So it may not have been picked up by many, but it was certainly picked up by a few of us around it. Very, very uncomfortable that was.
That was the last time we'd played in Ukraine. So, yeah, I'd like to think that maybe the next time we do go there, that attitudes may have changed and things might be a little different, you would hope now.
Yeah, I would hope so. It was a classic James Milner game. Remember him basically covering every blade of grass and playing in almost every position, apart from in goal. I just always remember him being right back at one point and then being out on the left wing, charging towards their box, and then in the next attack it was just yeah. I mean, he's always stuck out for me as a player that's very underrated.
Yeah.
Throughout my early Coventry years, we had a guy called Paul Telfer that kind of followed Gordon Strachan wherever he went. He ended up at Southampton and he ended up at Celtic after as well. But Telfer, he was a proper utility player. He'd play everywhere apart from in goal. Not a lot of people liked him, but because he was always all right, and he got a lot of stick that was unfair, really. He'd run through walls for you. And that's I've always thought about that about Milner. But the last 2 or 3 years, you look at how well he's actually done, and you think, God, England could really do with a player like him now. They could really, really could. But, yeah, I mean, Milner stands out in that game for me. Yeah, and I think it was Frank Lampard's 100th cap.
It was, Frank's 100th cap. I watched the footage on YouTube before we've had this chat, and England played in those red shirts that were, I think they had like the collar on it, and it had some sort of emblem about, I think it was 150 years of the FA underneath the badge. So it's red shirts, white shorts, and red socks. In gold, that's right. Yeah, the crest was in gold. And one of the things that I did notice, obviously it's like a running track ground, but there was a row of white cars behind one of the goals on the running track, very sort of reminiscent of the very old Chelsea ground before they renovated it, where they used to have cars behind the goal. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't, to be honest. No, I mean there's quite a lot I remember of that stadium, but I don't actually remember that the cars at all. No.
There's a row of white cars. You have to have a watch of that one. And I watched it, and Theo Walcott had a fair few chances in the game.
He's another player. I mean, I think he got subbed quite late on. I think he
did.
He played almost the whole game, I think, but was that one of his last games for England? I don't know. I don't think he played much more after that, really. I don't think.
Quite possibly.
I think he had an ACL, didn't he? Not long after that, I think it was about 2014, 2015. He got his ACL. I think it was Arsenal, Spurs. I think he got that. So, that kind of that would have finished it really for him anyway, international level. I do remember him, and I do remember how he's, how he played in that game. And he's another player that you just look at and you just think, you look at games like that and you think, how did he not end up getting more caps than he did? And with the promising start he had as well,
Yeah.
I find it a bit sad, really, that a player of that quality was just so badly underused for so long, and it was just for one reason or another, it didn't work out with him. And I mean, another player that played in that game was Wilshere, and I mean, he was just coming to the fore as well. And you think, how good was Jack Wilshere back then? And you know, the game since then, like the one in Slovenia, the first game he played there, where he ran the show and scored 2 brilliant goals from pretty much the same spot. But again, Jack Wilshere, what we could do with a player like him, you know, that
of his caliber,
as good as what he could have been. There's plenty of players. I've just brought up the squad list now, and there's plenty of players in that team that you just look at and you think, you know,
well, yeah. I mean, let's just run through the team. That it was Joe Hart in goal, Carl Walker, Ashley Cole, Stephen Gerrard was captain, Gary Cahill, Phil Jagielka, Theo Walcott, Frank Lampard, Ricky Lambert, Jack Wilshere, and James Milner. And with the two subs that came on that day, Ashley Young and Tom Cleverley. He came on for it was Theo Walcott. So he's one of Tom Cleverley's few appearances, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I don't really remember his involvement in the game. It was only 3 minutes before the end. And I mean, he didn't necessarily have a distinguished England career, did he? Most England players that I've seen play, I can say a lot about them, but Tom Cleverley isn't one that I can say a lot about, to be honest.
CJ, thank you very much for taking us back to 2013 and that 0-0 draw with Ukraine.
It's, as I said, it's a place I'd love to go again, just see what it's like now, and just see whether there's been any kind of rebuilding job to what it was kind of back then.
Well, maybe we will. Maybe we'll be drawn with them at some stage soon. Who knows? But it would be certainly an interesting place to go back to. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right, mate. Cheers.
Magic. Thank you very much. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Cheers to CJ for his time, and you can follow him on Twitter at CJ_CovBlaze. Ukraine 0, England 0. Proof that you can choose the game you go to, but you can't choose the score. But it's the memories that will stick with you. As I said at the beginning, email me, 3lionspodcast@gmail.com or 3lionspodcast on Twitter. Tell me your first away game and all the stories that go with it, and we'll go about getting you on board. We're also on Facebook and Instagram too, and if you'd be so kind, please do leave a 5-star review on the likes of iTunes. Would be most appreciated. And as you probably know, we have our other series on the go at the moment, looking at England at the European Championships. We're halfway through that at the moment, reliving previous disasters and occasional successes, speaking with various England fans. And all those previous episodes can be found at 3lionspodcast.com. And I'll drip feed some more over the next few months. Until the next time, stay safe, look after each other. Cheers.